content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and of course you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers. Before I get things started, like I always do, I want to give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel. I want to give a shout out to Super Tech, Liz Terrell, Rogish the Billmonger, Michael Ross, and Gregory Oliver. I'd like to give a shout out to Darkside Excellence, Greg, Rais Muajid, Darnell Smith, and Antonio Feria. I want to shout out Papa Didas, Barry Little, Alan Wiley, Mr. Valentino, and Jason Hales. Much blessings to Final Watcher, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, 77 Base X, Craig, and Omni Americana. Shouts out to Cameron 87, Deshaun Nolly, Brian Peaks, Nelson, and Apex Prowler. Shouts out to Kareen Henry, Doc LaRock, Julius Ferguson, B. Hillfire, J. Charles, Mark Hope, Lee Ways. Peace and blessings go out to Jeffrey Speed, The Face, Mark Swift, Show Me, Black Dog, Odd Collard, Raphael Brown, Deanne Donald Watts. Much love goes out to Cozy Corner, hiphop.catv, Coach DC, The Remedy, Kashif Caldwell, and Ominous Black. Shouts out to I Am Black Man, Nichita, True King 337, Mr. Blue Collar, Barnolas, Kyle J. Sura, I'm Just Jules. Shouts out to Ab Media 83, Brian McMurray, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Artisan MC, Mr. Heat, M. Isaiah Lee. Shouts out to Isa Abdul Zahir, Sir Anthony, ML Law, Charles Rogers, Universal 178. Shouts out to Black Swerve 404, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, C Truth the Revelator, and Gold Professor. Shouts out to Arthur Unknown, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalonja Kala, Ricky Dawson, Cedric Bowman, True 7360. Blessings out to BK Born Shaheed, James Washington, Hostile Adept, Seven Coast Dojo, W. Pierre 1, BGS Ibmore, and Marvin Battle Jr. Much blessings goes out to y'all, man. And also, I want to give a shout out to my brother in heaven, Forrest Windu. Shout out to you, my brother. I hope everything is going great behind those pearly gates. I also want to give a shout out to all the people on the Patreon side, Darnell Smith, Chris York, Excalibur, Jason Warren. Shouts out to Soul Pen, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Kwaku 217, S. Haywood, Dragon 59, Supreme Ibmore, Adrian Hicks. And last but not least, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and Asangwa. Shout out to y'all, man. Thank you so much for your ongoing support and your help. I appreciate that, man. Every little bit helps. And, me keeping this thing going. So, man, much blessings and love to y'all, man. Thank you so much for your support. Appreciate that. And if you're inquiring about how you, too, can become a member of the Green Gorilla channel, well, this is how you do it, man. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. The place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. All right, man, we're back. And straight out of the gate, I want to give a shout out to Jerome. Thank you so much for your donation, sir. Appreciate that. And also, I want to give a shout out to Rashid Barnes. Thank you, sir, for your donation. I appreciate that. And thank you for joining me this afternoon. We're not yet quite in the evening time here, but shout out to Abu Kapal, Alonzo, Adam Williams, PK Angel, Rashid Barnes, Mikael McCullen, Drew Main, Jones Boy. Shout out to y'all, man. And special shout out to Barry Little, man, for holding it down in the chat. Shout out to Herb Saint, man. What's up in NOLA, baby? And shout out to Just Ass Shar, man. How you doing, man? Glad to see you here, man. And, you know, today what I want to do is have a conversation about macroeconomics. A lot of times black folks get caught into, you know, this microeconomic conversation, and typically it, you know, reduces to morality and desert in relation to social positioning and, you know, social, you know, condition. Namely that, I mean, you know, your lot in life pretty much is reflective of the efforts you put forward. And so therefore, if there's something awry or amiss in your current situation, then for the most part, that could be, you know, reduced to your moral flaws or your moral integrity, your work ethic. And maybe one day I'll do a show about the work ethic and, you know, how it's connected to capitalism by means of a sociologist by the name of Max Weber. I might do that, but, you know, it's not going to be titillating and interesting, but it is interesting to me, but it might not be so interesting to you. If you want to see something like that, put a one in the chat and I'll do that one of these days. But at any rate, you know, it's just, you know, in the black community, we got this idea, this notion that we got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. You know, we got to work hard. We got to invest. And if we didn't spend money on frivolous items and consumer electronics, or, you know, for women, hair weave, and, you know, if we just rallied together and invested in industry, then all of a sudden we would be better off. That's pretty much how the story goes. I don't know what you think about that. To some degree, I agree. I mean, you must make an effort. You must put forth your best. You must try to overcome obstacles. You should make the best out of your life. You should strive and struggle to be industrious. But, you know, my issue is, at the end of the day, desert or hard work is neither a necessary nor a sufficient condition for you being successful in a capitalist economy. It just is not. Some people work hard and they never become successful. Some people don't work hard at all and they are successful. That's just how this game goes. So there's a difference, and I think people need to understand what this difference actually is. I'm not going to get into this here, but there's a difference between desert, which is the noun form of the verb to deserve, and merit. There's a difference between desert and merit. Desert has something to do with what you deserve. You know, what you're entitled to related to what you've put in, your effort, your energy. But merit is something different. You may deserve to win the prize because of the hard work and the effort that you put into working towards the goal of winning the prize, but you might not merit it because someone else outdid you. Not because they tried harder, just because they have more skill, more knowledge, more talent. So there's a difference between merit and desert, and people need to understand what this distinction is. But people mix and blur these concepts all the time. And I think, you know, if you want some kind of clarity, then you have to be a hair splitter in this regard. But again, black people are preoccupied with microeconomics and desert as it pertains to social economic condition. But very rarely do we take a look at macroeconomics. And today what we're going to do is take a look at the financialization of the economy. Now, I will have you know that the financialization of the economy is not just a U.S. phenomena. It is a Western phenomena, and it's taking off in other, parts of the world. So this is a trend, but the trend was set in motion. My argument is that it was set in motion by the Carter administration and the Trilateral Commission with austerity measures and with supply side economic theory. That's to me the origin of the financialization of the economy, at least the springs of it. But this is not going to be one of those shows where it's all about emotions and angst and energy directed towards lambasting any group of people. I just want you to know what the financialization of the market is, or the economy is rather, and what impact that will have on Black people going forward. Because it's having an impact on everybody in the middle class. So what's occurring is the rich are getting richer and the middle class is shrinking. And this is just a general trend. This is a worldwide trend in Europe, just as much as it is in the United States and even some parts of Asia. So you would be well to have some sort of cursory knowledge of what financialization is. And so in order to do this, what I'm going to do is show you 2 videos. And then after that, I'm going to read an article. And this should, give you some idea of what financialization is. And then after that, I'll open up the lines of communication. And if some people out there are in the finance sector, I would like for you to contribute, if you can, to give us some more insight into this phenomena called financialization. So having said all that, man, I'm going to show the first video, which to me is pretty much, to me, amoral and almost, to some degree, it seems like a promotion of the idea of financialization. So watch that. And after having watched that, I'll play the second one. And they're very short. They're underneath 4 minutes each. One is only 2 minutes, and the other one is like 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So it should hold your attention and give you some insight into what financialization is. So the first video seems sympathetic to financialization to some degree, but the second video is an invective, a critique of financialization. So let's get this underway, man. So Financialization 1. Let's do it.
Financialization is an increase in the size and importance of a country's financial sector relative to its overall economy. Financialization has occurred as countries have shifted away from industrial capitalism. This impacts both the macroeconomy and the microeconomy by changing financial markets and by influencing corporate behavior and economic policy. Financialization also affects individuals and families. John's great-grandparents worked in automobile factories. His grandparents were farmers. His parents worked for a paper company, and he works on Wall Street. Each generation of his family worked in one of the fields that offered the most jobs at that time. As John was growing up, the financialization was in full swing, and that steered him toward a job as an investment banker. The financial sector offers many more jobs and much better pay than it did when his parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents were working. In the United States, the size of the financial sector as a percentage of gross domestic product has grown from 2.8% in 1950 to 7.9% in 2012. Financialization has also caused incomes to increase more in the financial sector than in other sectors of the economy. Individuals working in the U.S. finance sector have experienced a 70% increase in their incomes relative to workers in other sectors since 1980. The United States has the world's largest and most liquid financial markets, but financialization has also occurred in many other countries around the world, even in emerging markets such as Mexico and Turkey.
Okay, so yeah, you had no sound from me, and I apologize for that. Just me not doing what I'm supposed to do technically, and I apologize for that. But ultimately, what I was trying to point out is that, the financial sector of the economy has tripled over the past few years, the past few decades, in fact. And the other point that I was trying to make that I didn't make, and I apologize for that. The other point is that people who are a part of the financial sector of the economy who work in that area, their income gains have increased 70%, while everybody else's wages and income gains have either remained, for the most part, stable or they've declined. So those were the points that I made. So I apologize for that. Sorry. And shout out to the Prophet of Thought. Anytime you put caps in any of my chats, for some reason I got a bot. I'll probably end up terminating that bot. But shout out to you, Prophet of Thought, man. What's good with you, brother? So anyway, that's the first video. Now I want to show the second video, which is for the most part a kind of a critique of financialization. So here goes it.
For every dollar earned by the average U.S. worker, how much would you guess a top CEO makes? $30? $40? If this were 1970, you wouldn't have been far off. It was $45. But since that time, the wage gap has exploded. Today, a top CEO takes home $800 for every dollar earned by the average worker. The result? Massive wealth inequality. Just 5 men control half of all the wealth in the world.
Now, damn, 5 men control more than half of the wealth in the world. That's saying a lot. And also, the average CEO makes $800 for the average man's or the average person's $1. Now, I don't have a problem with inequality to some extent. But when the inequality becomes too distorted, well, then you're leaving room open. You're leaving room open for a revolution is what you're doing. But for some reason, I guess the material comfortability of people in the United States is so secure that they never think to get upset or angry about any of this. But that's just worth thinking about. 5 men own half of the world's wealth. Damn, you only live one life. You can't take it with you. I mean, damn, there's people out here struggling for real. So you got half of the world's wealth. It's only 5 of y'all? Man, that's crazy. But let me keep pushing.
This cripples our economy, eliminates the middle class, and grows poverty. So how did we end up with such a huge wage gap? One of the reasons was the rising popularity of paying corporate executives with stock instead of a fixed salary and bonuses like other workers.
Okay, this is another important point about what financialization is and how it operates. So at one time, chief executive officers of corporations used to be paid just like everybody else. I mean, they got salaries, okay? And every now and then they would get bonuses and stuff like that. But what's occurred now is a situation in which CEOs are offered stock of the companies in which they work. And so this creates a funny kind of practice within the domain of the financial sector. And I think they're going to explain it to some degree, but ultimately they engage in what's called buybacks. Okay, so just keep watching.
Before the 1980s, most CEOs were paid a salary and got bonuses based on the success of their company. Makes sense, right? But then there was a major shift. Some call it financialization, where Wall Street schemes to move money and take fees based on transactions began to pull in unprecedented profits.
And let me just explain this, man. If you don't know about financialization and the effect that it has on the economy, you do to some degree every time you use a cash app, every time you use a debit card or a credit card. That's financialization. So if somebody gives you a $20 donation and you take that donation and you transfer those funds from one account to another account or from an application like Cash App to your bank account, if you want that money instantly, they're going to charge you for that money. That's financialization to some extent. Okay. But what we're talking about, that's a micro finance charge. But we're talking about finance on a macro level. All right, so let's keep watching.
Today, only about 5% of CEOs' income comes from salary and bonuses. Almost all the rest, 83.6%, comes from stocks. Why is this important? Because now the CEO cares most about driving up the price of the stock instead of improving the company as a whole and providing good wages and benefits to employees. To maximize their take, CEOs hatched a brilliant plan for increasing the price of their company's stock.
All right, before we talk about what their plan was, what the CEOs have done, I want to, kind of go back a little bit. So, at one time, corporations in America were structured in such a way that, well, you invest in the industry, you invest in the company, and you work on improving the products and the services of the company, and the money would matriculate and trickle down in order to help benefit the people who worked at the company, who then had money to go out and buy products. Okay? But what is happening is something entirely different. So instead of investing back in the company, the financial operators of these companies, the executives, are trying to drive the stock of the company up by one could argue some unsavory means, or through means of a shell game, a kind of a virtual game, which, in the end, I don't think this can be sustained. But that's just my opinion. And that's why I'm asking people who are in the financial sector in this space, if you could, after I get done reading this article that I have, and I'm not going to read the entirety of the article, just the introduction, but to lend some sort of help in understanding this phenomena, this practice, this macroeconomic trend called financialization. But let me continue.
Instead of using company profits to do research and development or compensate their hardworking employees, they just use the company's money to buy back shares of the stock. Here's how it works. When shares are pulled out of circulation by the company, the existing shares grow in value. If you have 100 shares worth $1, but you buy back 50 shares, each share that's left is worth $2. The CEO who controls a lot of those remaining shares just made an absolute killing. Back in 1981, only 2% of a company's profits were used to buy back their own stock. By 2007, right before the crash, companies were using 75% of their profits to buy back stock. This is money that could have been used to expand their business, invest in new technology, or pay their workers a higher wage. Instead, CEOs partnered with investors to drive up the price of the stock, sell off their shares for easy profits, and make out like bandits. And when companies don't have profit to reinvest, they're forced to downsize through layoffs, reduce costs by outsourcing production, and cut wages and benefits for workers. Can't find a decent paying job anymore? This is why. So when a CEO says their company doesn't have the money to raise wages, what they mean is they need that money to buy back stock so they can keep making 800 times your salary, leaving workers, our community, and the whole economy behind.
Okay, so that's it. And look, I'll be the first to admit that that video is a little bit biased. Okay, but I mean it is to some extent accurate. I mean, CEOs are engaged in the practice of buybacks. That's one of the chief ways that they generate income for themselves and to enhance, the financial solvency of the corporation. But one has to ask the question, like, is this real or is this just a shell game? And if it's just a shell game, how long can the game be sustained? And we know that it has disastrous effects and has a disastrous impact on the working people. Their wages stay at a stagnation level, whereas the CEO's money and the chief financial officers of the corporations, I mean, they make a killing. But that money is never invested back into improving the quality of the company the way that it used to be. One could call this Fordism, okay, based upon the model of Henry Ford. But right now, what you're dealing with is a situation in which the economy has moved from an industrial base to a service base and a finance-based economy. Okay, and the middle class are the ones who are hurting the most. And it's not just black folks, but, if the white man got a cold, then you got the flu, you probably got COVID. Okay, so if it's the case that $10 can't buy the same amount of products that you could get in the 80s or the early 70s, well, then here's one of the reasons why. It's more than likely because of the financialization of the economy and not investment into the workers and the improvement of the manufacturing base of any particular company, right? Especially if it is a manufacturing based company. I have to say that. But, I'm an old guy, man. I'm not totally old, but, I'm 50. And so, I remember, man, I used to go buy cigarettes for my mother and, man, them joints was like $1.25, man. Nowadays, if you go buy a pack of cigarettes, man, I guarantee you, man, it all depends on what city it's in, but I guarantee you that pack of cigarettes, man, is going to cost somewhere around $5 to $7. I remember when I used to go to the gas station, a candy bar would be like 25 cents. Now those candy bars, man, you walk into a gas station, man, they're like $1.75, almost $2. But the wages that people receive haven't climbed up with the same rate of the price of goods. And so, you could buy less, even though you're supposedly making just as much or more money because your wages haven't increased with the price of goods and services. And so that's the issue, right? Your money does less. It works less for you. Okay. Now I'm going to take a quick break. And when I come back from that, I'm just going to read this article, or at least the first couple of pages from the article. And after that, I'll leave the floor open. And then I'll see if somebody can give us more insight on this phenomenon, financialization. Be right back. All right, y'all, we're back. And so what I'm going to do is read this article to you. And after that, I'll open up the floor. I'll probably take another break and I'll open up the floor. But let me get right to this article, man. I assume that you can see this. The title of the article is Financialization and Equal Opportunity, and it was drafted by an organization by the name of Demos. And of course, Demos is a Greek word. It means mob or the people or something like that. Roughly, it can be translated as that. That's where the word democracy comes from. It's the stem, the root of the word democracy, okay? The person who wrote this is Wallace C. Tuberville, and he's a senior fellow at Demos, okay? So about Demos, and I think it's fitting for me to explain this because I don't want you to think that I'm putting forth any spin. You can think about this what you will, but when you think about it, you have to have other thoughts related to the whole concept of macroeconomics and deservingness related to one's social and economic position. If it's the case that there's a trend happening on the macro level, it's bound to have some effect of people on the micro level, especially if they're not aware of what is going on and what the general thrust and trends are at the macro level. All right. So Demos is a public policy organization working for an America where we all have an equal say in our democracy and an equal chance in our economy. Our name means the people. It's the root word of democracy, and it reminds us that in America, the true source of our greatness is the diversity of our people. Our nation's highest challenge is to create a democracy that truly empowers people of all backgrounds so that we have a say in setting the policies to shape opportunity and provide for our common future. To help America meet that challenge, Demos is working to reduce both political and economic inequality, deploying original research, advocacy, litigation, and strategic communications to create the America the people deserve. All right, so if you want to contact Demos, you can go to demos.org. They have a brick and mortar mail address, 225th Avenue, New York, New York. And they have a media contact as well. So if you want to talk to somebody, I think I've seen representatives and liaisons from Demos on MSNBC, Fox News, and a whole host of other media outlets. So, yeah, there's that. So again, this is like a 70-page document. I'm only going to read the introduction because I think the introduction kind of lays out the issue here. And I think you should do some more research on this yourself if you think that this is just something I'm cooking up and spinning. There are a lot of people talking about financialization and the havoc that this practice is wreaking on the middle class. And again, if white folks got the cold, black folks got the flu. All right. So having said all that, here's the intro, and it's not long. In 3 decades after World War II, America became the first predominantly middle-class country in the world, and our poverty rate was cut in half. Americans experienced what scholars describe as the Great Compression. In this era, real average compensation rose nearly 1 to 1 with productivity gains. The bottom 90% of households, in terms of income, enjoyed most of the benefits of growth over the slightly longer period from 1993 to 1973. And there's a figure that demonstrates this. I'm not going to show that. But anyway, inequality of income and wealth in the U.S. was at its low ebb. So we're talking about a few decades after World War II, the middle class began to emerge in a way that it hadn't ever in U.S. history. And I think that some of the reason that a lot of people in America got behind Trump was because Trump, to some degree, promised to bring back industries that had been outsourced to our competitors. And but the question is, was he just selling wolf tickets? Is there any way to actually solve these problems and to, reinstitute prosperity for the middle class? Well, one could argue not with the financial practice of financialization. But anyway, over the most recent 3.5 decades, the Great Compression has been almost completely reversed. A large majority of households has seen minimal or no real income gains, and a substantial minority actually lost ground. Meanwhile, a tiny minority of the most affluent households has enjoyed unprecedented income gains, with the richest 1% of households capturing nearly 70% of income gains between 1993 and 2012, and virtually all of the growth since the Great Recession. Today, our society suffers from levels of inequality that threaten to surpass even the extremes of the Gilded Age. And of course, the Gilded Age is the age of the robber barons, the age of the trusts that had to be busted up by the government because they had monopolies. Okay? And then they go on to say in this article, of course, the benefits of the Great Compression were distributed unevenly across racial and ethnic categories. Now, we know this is the case because we know that many of the policies that FDR put into place and many of the bureaucracies didn't allow black folks and other minorities to cash in on the policies and those, procedures. They just weren't available for us. We didn't get FHA loans like white folks did. We didn't get the GI Bill like white folks did. Okay? So anyway, on average, white Americans always fared better. By the early 1980s, the wealth ratio of whites to African Americans was 12-1. So again, the early 80s, the wealth ratio of whites to African Americans was 12-1. So if you got $1, they got 12. You got $1,000, they have 12,000. You got 10,000, they have 100,000. You got 100,000, they got 1,000,000, and so on and so forth. The wealth ratio of whites to Latinos was 8-1. By 2009, these ratios had increased to 19-1 and 15-1, in part due to the disproportionate effects of the mortgage crisis caused by the financial sector. And we all know this is the housing bubble, okay? Where financial instruments were utilized in order to sell debt and to allow people to take on debt that they knew was not going to be able to be paid back. It's almost like, one of those pyramid schemes where if you're one of the first people to cash in on and to sell debt, you're good. But people on further down the flower or the line are the ones who get left holding the bag. Anyway, coming of this second Gilded Age has coincided with a number of important structural changes in our political economy. Today, our tax code is significantly less progressive. Our higher education system is less accessible and much more unequal, and our unions and labor rights are comparatively much weaker in the struggle for a fair distribution of wages. And this is some of the things that, I watched BGS's video on this issue, and I wanted to do something about financialization for quite a bit of time, but I really didn't know how people in the manosphere would actually take it. I assumed that they, would, for the most part, scoff at it and reject it, offhand. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much. But the whole idea here is that people who are wealthy pay less taxes. The cost of education, which you need to get a good paying job, is much higher and puts you in more debt than ever. And the unions and the labor rights are comparatively much weaker in the struggle for a fair distribution of wages. Now, I know that there are right-to-work states, and there's been a push for right to work as a policy and as a practice within the domain of the construction industry. Now, I'm a union member. I belong to an ironworker union, and for the most part, man, if you work, you get health benefits, money is being directed towards your pension, and also you get paid like $30 an hour. Those kind of jobs, how many black folks can argue that when they go to work, they're making $30 or more an hour for doing physical labor? Or menial or performing menial work. Even if the work is skilled, you'd be hard pressed to find nowadays people making that kind of money, and then on top of it, still getting good health benefits and still having money allocated towards a pension and a 401k or a retirement program. It's just not happening. So anyway, these structural changes have been justified as strengthening the private sector to encourage growth. So this is what is called supply side economics. The idea is that if you invest in the private sector, then it's going to, be a trickle down effect. That trickle down economics is what Reagan called it. If my memory serves me correctly. But where's the trickle down? Where is it? I'm still waiting for it, man. Anyway, growth that supposedly would lift up the middle and low income households. But the exact reverse has unfolded. The rich have gotten vastly richer, while the majority of Americans have seen no real gains or lost ground. The rationale behind these changes was market libertarianism, which was promoted heavily by the right. And then to some degree, it still is. So while I may agree with the right to some degree on some of their social issues, I don't necessarily agree with them on all of their economic issues. But that's just my opinion. So I think, they're putting a check on some of the excesses of the left, but at the same time, I'm still not down with them with their economic policy and some of the, ways that they deal with issues related to race. But that's just my opinion, okay? So the rationale behind these changes was market libertarianism and the belief that markets are far more efficient at allocating capital among alternative uses than the government. And you're going to hear this argument again and again and again. This is classic liberalism. This is what Adam Smith argued in The Wealth of Nations and a whole host of persons who've come after him. Namely, that if you interfere with markets, you're going to get inefficiencies. This is what the Chicago School of Economics and Milton Friedman argues ad nauseum. But I mean, think about it. I mean, what about the Gilded Age? Where's their answer to that? Where's their answer? But anyway, if the 2008 financial crisis did nothing else, it should have taught us that the market is not a freestanding, efficient machine that should be set free to work its magic. And I agree with that. Now, you might not tamper with it and bring about what some members of the left want. I'm not advocating for strict equality related to income. I think that's ridiculous. It's quixotic. You can never get there. And I don't think you should aim to get there, okay? But the question is if you have too much inequality and you're not growing the middle class and you're not making sure that they have the capacity to live a comfortable life and to buy and sell goods, you're destroying the economy. You're destroying the economy. But that's just my opinion, okay? So initially in the wake of the bank bailouts, and the funny thing is, these people, when they make mistakes, when the financial sector makes mistakes, the average people have to belly up, bail them out, because they're too big to fail. When a corporation makes a mistake or they go bust, then the American people have to save those institutions, even if they're private. But, I digress. So much of the discussion focused on the problem of excessive risk in the financial system, culminating in the Dodd-Frank legislation passed in 2010. More recently, researchers and analysts have raised a deeper set of questions about, and they're talking about derivatives, okay, and the buying and selling of debt, and prognosticating about what the market will look like, predicated upon buying and selling financial instruments, which to me is all a bunch of nonsense, man. That's just my opinion. It's a bunch of BS, okay? Many forces contribute to growing inequalities of income and wealth, but the financial system is the medium through which they work and has become a controlling factor. To illuminate this economic transformation, our analysis departs from previous discussions of financial reform by assessing how the evolution of the financial sector since 1980 and its expanding role in the economy interact with other forces in the economy so that wealth is no longer cycled into well-paying jobs that raise average living standards and provide security for ordinary Americans. So that's Fordism. Okay, that's Fordism. Instead, wealth increasingly grows only itself for the benefit of a tiny minority of business owners and managers and to the detriment of the non-financial economy of production, jobs, household earnings, and real economic growth. And the funny thing about this is, you see people on the ground like crabs in a bucket fighting with one another over the scarce jobs that do exist in order to demonstrate, their fitness as, valuable people. This is the irony of this. To me, it's a sad irony that there are macroeconomic forces at play and people are fighting with one another over the crumbs in order to demonstrate their fitness as valuable members of society and their worthiness of finding a mate and their fitness and being lionized by members of the community. It's just a lot going on, man. Anyway, understanding this is important in a practical sense, contrary to the market libertarian views held by a large majority of decision makers today. Policies aiming to reduce inequalities of wealth and income may also be more efficient in terms of growth, raising living standards over the long term. So there are a lot of people who have bought in to libertarianism, or at least, what I would consider to be neoliberalism, which is a variant of classical liberalism. But anyway, the compounding increase in inequality driven by weak economic growth is a story that leading researchers, most notably Thomas Piketty. Go look up Thomas Piketty and Financialization, because he's one of the persons who kind of coined this phrase and noticed this trend most scrutinizingly and most adroitly. But anyway, see unfolding in the 21st century, particularly in the United States. So he's like, okay, it's weak economic growth that's occurring. It's only occurring for one group of people, but not everybody else. Yet in discussions of America's growing inequality, we often hear that policies designed to promote greater equality, such as implementing a more progressive tax code, will backfire because they will reduce investment and shrink the economic pie, thereby limiting opportunities for lower income households. Our analysis turns this metaphor on its head by examining how, in fact, the financial system is shrinking the economic pie for all Americans, while simultaneously channeling nearly all of the remaining growth exclusively to the most affluent among us. Indeed, we argue that financialization is not only a major driver of growing inequality, but also undermines key sources of sources of growth and job creation, effectively transforming our economy into something approaching a zero-sum game between financial wealth holders and the rest of America. Basic investment patterns provide a window on what is happening. Big businesses have increasingly elected to forego investments of profits and newly raised capital in job creating, enterprise growth, and new product lines. Instead, they distribute cash assets derived from operating profits to shareholders in share buybacks, reducing claims on remaining assets. Small business formation and investment have been shrinking for at least a decade, as is government investment, a critical growth engine in the 20th century economy at every level. So this is something that's interesting to me as well, because if you listen to a lot of YouTube content creators and a lot of, black self-help and, black self-determining theorists, they'll tell you this: we need to be creating wealth and investing in small businesses. But this is down at the macro level. How do you even compete? How do you even begin to work your way out of this situation without even being aware of this situation at a macro level? And I don't hear anybody talking about this. I've heard BGS talk about it, but I haven't heard very many people. I've heard Antonio Moore talk about it in his discussions of, black folks and the need for reparations. But anyway, so all of these negative trends are so closely related to financialization that they must be seen as an element of it. Effectively, the real economy is being converted into a servant of passive investment that either exploits or bypasses ordinary workers and households, with the bottom line of more household debt, shrinking labor incomes, diminishing job security, and weak employment growth for a large majority of Americans. Now, this is important: a large majority of Americans. Just be aware. Remember the cold flu analogy and comparison. Whether and how America addresses this problem is extraordinarily consequential for our society. Current trends, if left unabated, will likely reduce the median living standard of future generations for the first time in American history. I mean, it's already been happening to us, but Further, as Piketty's elegant historical model of growth and income distribution suggests, the compounding force of extreme income inequalities will create dynastic wealth, passing between fewer and fewer hands across generations. challenging our fundamental political values. Public policies, he says, can diminish and reverse these trends. However, the near complete destruction of campaign finance limits under the Roberts Supreme Court does not bode well for winning historically effective political solutions to this problem anytime soon, such as taxation of wealth at levels that would make a difference. Thus, reining in financialization, the structure that facilitates inequality, is all the more important. It may also be politically viable given the range of potential stakeholders, including financial stakeholders who are losing out in an economy designed to grow Wall Street at the expense of Main Street. So in this report, they say, we make a case for definancialization of our economy from a standpoint of equal opportunity, increased middle and lower incomes, job creation, and sustainable economic growth. So they say, first, we examine the conditions that have emerged over the last 3.5 decades, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to read all of that, but you get some gist of what financialization is. This is where we are now. And if it keeps on at this rate, man, black folks are going to be obliterated. Talk about high value man. Man, this is having an impact on white folks. But anyway, man, I thought I should share that, and I did. So I'm going to get out of this screen, man. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to open up the lines and see if anybody has some insight for me. If you do, please join me. If you don't, I'm about to end this doggone stream, man. So I'll be right back. All right, man, I'm back. I've left an invite, and we already have, I'm so glad that Alonzo Hall decided to come in and join this conversation. So I'm going to bring him up, and others feel free to come in and to help us out to try to figure out what's going on with this whole subject matter related to financialization. Alonzo Hall, what's going on, bro? How you doing, man?
How you doing today? Thank you for bringing me up.
Oh, for sure, man. It's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure to have you.
Not a problem. I want to
we know that you sell insurance and some other kind of financial instruments. Tell us what you think about this trend, this trend of financialization. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it something that should come to a close? Will it ever come to a close? I mean, what do you think about this? I'm not an economist, but I do know about social and political issues and ideas, and I know that an offshoot of that has to deal with the economy to some degree. So just give me your thoughts, your considered thoughts and judgments, or your knee-jerk reactions.
Not a problem. Most likely it's closer to knee-jerk reactions, but personally, it's likely not something that's going to come to a close. However, it is going to get worse if you just look at the situations of people. As you said, with things such as inflation.
I can't hear you. I don't know if let me say this. Mm-hmm. Can anybody else hear him? Because I can't hear him. Put a 1 if you can hear Alonzo Hall, because for some reason I can't hear him. Alonzo, speak up again.
Can you hear me?
I don't know what's going on with my audio, man.
Hello?
Okay. For some reason, I can't hear him. I was able to hear him initially, but then all of a sudden I can't hear him now. But go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
All right. So yeah, with inflation being at about 3% for approximately the last 60 years, um, things like a gallon of milk are just increasing. For example, the landlord at my apartment in Brooklyn in his 60s said that he worked at a grocery store to purchase his brownstone for about $85,000 in the 1980s. Today, that property is worth approximately $2 million. So he had a benefit there, but as you said, with the cold flu situation, he's one of our community who was able to access that, but that's not something that's going to continue. And then with things like the education, it becomes either cost prohibitive, or people are getting into a mortgage before they can even go outside and buy that house.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the issue. You're talking about, especially as it pertains to black people who already didn't start well. I mean, most of us don't have very much to start with to begin with. There's already a racial wealth gap, because we've been excluded from policies that lifted up the white middle class. And principally, that came through federal housing authority loans, the GI Bill, and the policies that were put in place from FDR during the New Deal. Okay, so I mean, not to say that there weren't blacks who were able to capitalize off of to some degree, off of the New Deal, because you're always going to have exceptions and outliers. So I'm talking about the largest numbers of black folks who could probably be doing better than what they are had they been actually included to the degree that they should have been included in the first place. Okay, but now you have a situation in which, I mean, the matters are getting worse, even amongst white folks. I mean, the inequality is becoming even more glaring. Okay, so what do we do about this? I mean, how do we think about this?
Well, one thing I would say is something as simple as life insurance is a great way to pass down generational wealth. There was actually an article I read that said black people buy more life insurance than white people. We just don't buy it correct. So the average black person will buy 1 year's worth of salary replacement, while the average white family will buy at least 3 years worth of salary replacement. When the average funeral is $21,000 and the average income is $50,000, that leaves a person with basically $30,000 in 1 year to not only replace the income, but the presence of a person.
Yeah, so one of the solutions could be for black folks is to invest in insurance, and to do so not just 1 year, but at least 3 years.
Correct.
Now we also have another brother who's coming into the show. His name is Chris. Can you hear me, Chris? I finally got it to where I can hear you, Alonzo. So I'm sorry about any technical issues that arose in the first place.
Not a problem.
Chris, what do you have to say, my brother, to weigh in on this situation?
A part of it, I'm looking at it like it's just a return to the natural order. You know what I mean? There's always serfs and nobles. And what happened in America with the booming middle class, it was the only time in history something like that happened. It was unprecedented. No, something similar went on in China in the past 20 years, but it's still not normal. So the division of wealth is normal, and we have the freedom to kind of go in a direction, but it doesn't mean that it's easy or that it's going to happen to everybody. We're just grateful. We're just in a good position where we can see it. We do something about it, possibly, but it's the first time that we could even complain about it.
Okay, so your idea is this: we're going. So let me make sure that I got your argument straight. So, there's always existed inequality in society. And so now this is just an example of things returning to how they have always been. The degree of prosperity brought about between the 30s and the 70s was an anomaly. It was abnormal. Now things are returning back to the way that they always have been. You got those who have a lot, those who can barely scrape and scrap to survive. And this is going to be the new normal. Is that pretty much a fair assessment of what you've said? Yeah. So, I don't know, man. Man, a lot of Americans have have become comfortable with the idea that they could be a member of the middle class. I mean, this is what people have aspirations for. It's what they're told that they ought to do. I mean, this is what they've been told. I mean, the idea is don't rest on your laurels. Get up, get out, try to make something of yourself, try to get money. I mean, try to improve yourself, try to become a productive member of society, and then you'll be rewarded for that with a living wage and one where you could actually be comfortable and enjoy some, modicum of leisure to rest in between shifts. So now, I mean, the question is, where are we headed? Where are we going? And, there are some people who say we need...
I heard you said, I was listening to you earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, you were talking about, you showed a pic with 5 guys owning 50% of the wealth in the world, and that's not really accurate. There's a lot of money in trust accounts going back hundreds of years, thousands of years. There's wealthy people who we never hear about. So there's a lot of wealth that is not really accounted for in our public system. And some of the family has been in power for generations, and they don't like this competition that's coming. So that they're telling us doing better for herself, it doesn't really make everybody who's a player in this system comfortable. And this whole middle class thing is really a joke. There's an upper class, and that's just something that makes us feel good. And some of those people in that permanent class, they don't really want to see what you call this middle class to come in like that.
Yeah, I could hear some of what you said, but I mean,
moment too. So the same thing.
Yeah, this has been a global phenomenon. It's not something that's just been restricted to the United States. It's happening in Greece, Turkey. It's happening in Spain. I mean, it's happening everywhere. Okay. And were we just living a pipe dream? Was what happened during the immediate years or a few decades after World War II a fluke? That's the question. Are we going back to the way things have always been? The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That's the question. I don't know, but it just seems odd to me to measure one's moral status based upon how they're doing in the economy if there's overall problems with the way the economy is handled and established to begin with. If the middle class is growing smaller and smaller and wealth is becoming concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, then how does this bode for black folks in the future? My brother Ian Graves has just joined the stream. What's going on, Ian?
Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
All right, cool. Yeah, man, I think this is an interesting topic. It is a question of whether or not, what happened, in terms of what he said, like the ability to offer salary working at a grocery store or being a maid. Our forebears were able to buy houses and cars and so much. I mean, it was a fluke in the sense, you had the age of industrialization and so forth, because that's never going to happen again. There's never going to be happen again where we're going to have to ramp up in industrialization where labor becomes an important job skill. You know what I'm saying? It's never going to happen again. So right now at this point, basically they can replace probably almost every job that exists with some kind of computer or AI system. So the value of work in and of itself now has dropped off, and it's not going to come back. Can it come back in other countries that are not industrialized? That's possible. But in the industrialized country that we're in now, I don't see it happening. And especially, like the other gentleman said, there's money that families have that will never go into the system. Like America has what $100 trillion in wealth, but only make a small fraction, goes into the market to be traded back and forth. You know what I'm saying? Most of that wealth just sits, and it's just held. So at any point, even if there's a economic turnaround, they can still influence the market, in the way that they want, because they can put in those chips that they've been hiding, basically. So, we're looking at a real, economic chess match that I don't think that we can win, actually. What?
I had my mic muted, bruh. If that's the case, then what's the future for high value black men, man? If that's the case, do you hear me?
Say that again.
What if that's the case? If it is the case that the financialization of the economy is going to be the natural order of things, and that the middle class is going to continuously shrink, that corporations are going to continue to invest into the financial portions of or instruments of their assets and their structure. Well, what does that have to do with the future of black men? What? That's just a question I'm asking, man. I don't pretend to have the answers to that question. It's just something to think about. But again, black folks, we tend to, have a lot to say about what people deserve based upon where they are within the framework of the economy, without taking into consideration some of the accelerated trends in the financial sector of the economy itself. That's all I wanted to do, is to just draw people's attention to this, and to make them aware of it to some degree. Like, I'm not an economist, but that's why I wanted to have people get on the show and to have a discussion about it. So I don't know, man. My question to you was, Ian, what does that have to do with the future of the black high value man? You hear me, Ian? Well, Ian, he can't get his shit straight. But anyway, having said all that, man, I'm not going to hold y'all, man. I've been doing this for an hour and 19. I just wanted to draw your attention to this phenomenon going on in the economy. And PK Angel says he wish he could talk to me about it, but he's at work, man. Maybe one day, man, I'll just do it live and we can talk about some other stuff. But on another note, man, I know that some people were kind of upset with me in the show where you couldn't see people's names. I hope I've addressed that issue. It took me a while to figure it out, but I didn't have labels on my own in terms of a theme, and so you couldn't see anybody else's. So I got that situation straight. And another thing in relation to the woman who was on the show the last time, I apologize for her kind of being out of control. She didn't take over the show entirely, but what she did was indicative of what a lot of women do. For some reason, black women particularly, they just come into a space and they feel as if they can govern and dictate what's supposed to take place in the space just because they're them. I'm like, okay, I just wanted to hear it. I just wanted to hear what her argument was going to be. And for the most part, look, wearing bonnets in public is just trifling, man. Just like a do-rag in public is trifling, okay? Or wearing your pants sagging beneath your ass crack. That's just trifling, man. We know it. They know it. But if you can't tell somebody anything, then, whatever it is that they do is going to be good. So, And then another issue that came up recently that, I might talk about, but I'm almost tired of talking about this subject. An issue was brought up to me about Black Lives Matter. And no disrespect to the person who left a comment in one of my videos, but, people, when they talk about Black Lives Matter, if the only thing they do is get information about protestation, rioting, and what kind of legislative changes have taken place in various geographical locations and cities and municipalities throughout the U.S., if the only thing you get is knowledge of the fact that, BLM was there and there were people with BLM signs and, so on and so forth. I mean, the impression you're going to get is that they were actually moving and shaking with policymakers and legislators in order to get things changed. But that's just not the case, especially as it pertains to a place like Ferguson. So what happened was, let's just be frank, some kids, some young adults, I won't call them kids, some young adults burned down some property. Okay, they burned a Quick Trip down. I don't know if you know what a Quick Trip is, but it's like a mega gas station. Okay, they burned it to the ground, and they burned some other businesses in the municipality of Ferguson. Okay, and afterwards, other people who were members of the community and had organizations and who had knowledge of the kind of injustices that were taking place there, kind of, decided to rally behind these youngsters because, there was a slow boiling rage actually building up. So I know this because I'm from the city of St. Louis, and I know that at one point there was something called the Great Divorce, where St. Louis City was split apart from the county, and that the county developed a whole bunch of different municipalities with their own jurisdictional issues and their own jurisdictional strategies. And one of those strategies was to generate the bulk of their revenue from traffic violations. And of course, we know about the phenomena of driving while black, which leads to enhanced policing, people feeling like they're being treated unfairly and disproportionately, hit with bench warrants and fines and fees related to DWB. So, I mean, there were a whole host of people who were aware of these issues ahead of time, way before Ferguson occurred. But this was a slow boiling thing. And Mike Brown's death was, the catalyst for all of that to, just to spill out. And, there was an organization called Better Together and, a few other orgs. They actually worked with policymakers and legislators to change the way that these municipalities generate funds. So now it's at a point where, none of these municipalities in the city of St. Louis or the St. Louis County can generate any more than 10% of their revenue from traffic violations. And that's a good thing. So they can no longer use DWB in order to fund, their municipalities. That's a good thing. But my argument is it wasn't BLM that did that work. BLM wasn't even aware of that kind of work. They're worried about reforming the police, yeah, but they didn't know about the intricacies of what was taking place in the city of St. Louis. And one could argue that event is what sparked all of the current unrest related to what's going on today, and gave BLM a space. It opened up a space for them to be able to do what they did to begin with, which was, as far as I'm concerned, working in behalf of people who don't fit the demographic who's most subjected to extrajudicial police killing. So, or vigilante police killing, or having to deal with, policing in general. We already know black men are the most, or among the most policed black people in the world. The most policed people in the world. More black men in prison in the United States than women incarcerated damn near in the entire world. So anyway, man, it is what it is, man. I just wanted to address that. I might talk about it a little more with somebody else if I feel like it. But that's it, man. If nobody else will join me on this issue, I'll holler at y'all later, man. It's been one. I'll get with you next time. Peace.